Well, DC has been reading my diary, and it makes me very, very happy. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. First and only warning. Right now, this is going to be a short one, I think. We're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on February 5th, 2025, originally published January 8th, 2025. The first two, just brief comments about Batman and Robin number 17. I'm still enjoying this comic. It's not like blowing me away. There's some nice insight into Bruce Wayne's past and him training to become a detective. But as far as like detective-oriented stories like the whodunit and what's behind the mystery and stuff, that's the kind of story that's being told here mostly. And I'm not as drawn into that as a really character-centric story. Now, there are some nice character beats, some moments between Bruce and Damian as Bruce is wanting to push himself in ways that, he's just not recognizing his own limits when those around him like Oracle and Damian are, and they're saying, you need to rest. But then by the end of the issue, we see that Red Hood, Jason Todd, has been called in, I think called in by Batman, and he's more than happy. He's like, yeah, hey, you don't know your limits, that's fine by me, So he's a little bit more reckless and stuff. So I think there's going to be more potential for some of those kind of character dynamics where we see who Batman is as filtered through the perspectives of those around him. So there's some nice character stuff going on, but it's still mostly a mystery-centric, plot-centric story that's just kind of like fine, but I imagine I'll find it pretty forgettable when it's all over. Batman Dark Patterns number 2, We Are the Wounded, part 2. This story, last issue, introduced my favorite new villain in I don't know how long, the Wound Man, who has tacks and nails and rebar and all kinds of different things sticking into his body, sometimes going in one end and out the other. And he's got some kind of weird desire to be in pain. And he's doing, of course, terrible things, but Batman realizes he can't really exert any physical force on this guy because the way he's got these things positioned in his body, he's expertly done to make them almost lethal to him. So if he gets jostled around the wrong way or punched or something like that, he could instantly be killed. And so Batman feels kind of like his hands are tied. One thing that they did, I'm glad, explore is the idea of knockout gas, because that thought occurred to me as well in the first issue. I was like, well, just get out some spray that knocks him out and just make sure he doesn't fall too hard. But they kind of had Batman unpack kind of a cool moment. Let's jump to that for a second. Batman does resort to like a knockout gas, but his internal monologue is saying TV and comic books have misled people about knockout toxins. It's never as easy as a rag over the mouth or a dart from a rifle that puts the victim to sleep in seconds. It's far riskier than that. A dosage of chloroform or BZ needs to be carefully calibrated to the subject's body weight and lung capacity. A slight miscalculation and the risk of death from a seizure or heart failure is significant. And Batman curses to himself out loud as he realizes that seems to be what's happening after he just dosed the Wound Man. And so very quickly, he's like, stay with me, I'm getting you to the hospital. So he did just the most basic, you would think, the most light touch, harmless thing that you could do to somebody in comics, and yet he is realizing that he urgently needs to get this guy to the hospital. So this just continues to be a fascinating villain that creates a very interesting problem for Batman. There's other stuff going on in this story where likewise this is another kind of detective mystery type thing. I could do without the mystery and just focus a lot more on this villain and Batman's interactions with him. But, I guess they want to do other things too, and that's fine. But this is certainly the aspect of this story that I am finding most fascinating. But Aquaman number 1. written by Jeremy Adams, is the one that I really want to talk about. Jeremy Adams, such an interesting writer to me, as I've commented before. Some of the things that he seems to value in stories, some of the virtues that he seems to kind of express, they do seem to be at least inspired by some kind of Christian worldview that he was influenced by with people around him. I don't know if Jeremy Adams himself is a professing Christian, but there do seem to be some hallmarks of Christian thinking, at least, that are in very subtle ways showing up repeatedly in his writing. And I found that interesting, and I think his writing, just from a pure fan perspective, is like not totally blowing me away like a Gail Simone or Jeff Johns, but I'm still really enjoying that side of things too. But as much as I love writers like Jeff Johns and Gail Simone, no one has ever done what Jeremy Adams, with the help of absolute power, has finally done. And I hope so much this is permanent. If you've been following my content for a while, you may have deja vu, as I've talked about this a time or two in the past. But Aquaman now has telekinetic control of water, of H2O. And this is as a result of powers getting shuffled, as they called it, in the wake of the absolute power crossover event. So his wife, Mara, for as long as I think she's been around, for decades in publishing history, has had the ability to telekinetically control water. And you see that, of course, in the Aquaman movies as well. And this is a really cool ability. I love it. But I've always thought to myself and said several times, Aquaman should have this ability. For decades, Aquaman has been, especially in the context of the Justice League, the member that is not taken seriously because his powers don't seem all that cool. They seem a bit ridiculous, especially when they're not treated sympathetically. He can come across as just a guy who swims and can talk to fish. Now, of course, he does more than talk to fish. He, as the king of Atlantis, the king of the sea, actually commands fish and all different types of aquatic life. And that whole aspect of him being the leader of this entire massive undersea civilization, and the sea covering much more of the earth than there is land, makes him, as king of the sea, very, very significant. But if you get him out of the context of the ocean or large bodies of water, or out of the context of marine life that he can command, he's harder to justify as being on the same power level as the rest, or effectiveness level, as the rest of the Justice League members. And I've always thought to myself, it's in the name, Aquaman. He should just be God of water. And by that I mean like Magneto of water. The way Magneto can basically do whatever he wants with magnetic alloys, Aquaman should be able to do that with H2O. He should be able to knock people out just by slowing the flow of blood to their brain, because he slows down the flow of the H2O elements, and by association, all the things that they're attached to. He should be able to telekinetically throw people around, because we are mostly made of water, Now, that's not where he's at right now. That's not where Mara was at, I don't think. But we are now on a road that could take us there. Now, in this issue, he is just getting acclimated to these powers. Mara is needing to train him. I think that there's a very real possibility that Mara fans will be upset if this power is permanently transferred to him and she no longer has this ability. I can understand that. I can understand from kind of like a political ideology kind of standpoint. We, in Mara, have a very strong female character, and I'm in support of strong female characters existing. I don't have a particular agenda for that, but I think that's good. We need our Wonder Womans and our Captain Marvels and those kinds of things. Those are important. Our Batgirls and so on and so forth. So I don't want Mara to be without her water telekinetic powers forever. But I want Aquaman to have this power and more forever going forward. I really want this to be permanent. Imagine, like, everybody, nobody would make fun of Aquaman anymore if he was Magneto of water. Think about that for a second. No one, suddenly he would be the heavy hitter on the Justice League, because even Superman is, I think, probably made mostly of water. And if he wanted to bat Superman around with the kind of control over water I'm talking about, he could. And I think this could be the road to take us there, or at least to have some stories where temporarily in some kind of a heightened intensity mode, he has that level of control over water. But it's not all the time. I don't know. They could do stuff with this that like they did with the Speed Force for the Flash, who also back in the day turned him from a character that people basically thought of as the guy that can run fast to a character who can apply the concept of super speed in so many more diverse and creative ways than you would think. And that's what I want for Aquaman. That's what I've wanted for decades. For decades, I've wanted this. I've had this idea in my mind. I'm like, why has no one done this? Why has no one done this? So, how could this be permanent? How can we have our cake and eat it too? If Mera should get these powers back, and I do think she should. I thought that, before this absolute power thing, that there could just be some kind of, I don't know, not Arthurian legend, but like Atlantean legend about a fabled king who would be greater than all kings. It could be like the equivalent of almost like an Atlantean messianic kind of imagery, or maybe Arthur could be like the Davidic king, like he is the model king or something. I don't know, but there could be some kind of like prestigious fable about a coming Atlantean king who would be given by some kind of spell that was given to the nation of Atlantis, that it would imbue their ultimate king, their truly good and ultimate king, with the power to protect them. And this power would be to have control, manipulative control over water. So something like that. All you got to do is come to some kind of legend that then Aquaman becomes the guy that actually takes up that role and is bequeathed that ability going forward. And you don't need absolute power to do that. But since that's how this came about, we could say when Mera gets the power back, he still has some vestige of it, and there's a mystery of what's going on, what's this about, and we find out that this whole absolute power event just kind of awakened in some way this thing that was already that we were already building toward. I don't know, you can use this in some way as a trigger, whatever, but I think we can have our cake and eat it too. But at the end of the day, Aquaman has got to keep this. He has got to keep this. Please, Jeremy Adams and DC Editorial, I know you're not listening. Just keep reading my diary. Because this is very cool. Very cool turn of events. And that's right, you guessed it. I have chosen the white ring to represent my feelings about DC Comics this week. The white ring representing not so much an emotion, but life. But for me, when I choose it for my weekly ring selection, it means, man, these comics are making me feel alive. This is what I love about comic books. I'm so energized by this. And Aquaman #1 and this shift in the status quo, so promising. I'm more than hopeful, because we've already arrived at what I want for Aquaman. My hope is that we'll just stay here and we'll just develop this further. But right now, either way, I'm super energized with what has happened here as of Aquaman #1. And I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments below about these comics, about some comics that I didn't talk about. And then I also hope you check out our podcast, christiangeekcentral.com. No, the podcast is called Christian Geek Central. But if you go to christiangeekcentral.com, there's a ton more content there you can find made for you as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.